Thanks for taking your time out from your busy schedule. Thanks for joining us. We at Altport Experts India, we are thrilled to announce our brand new show, which is Ask the Expert Show. Through webinars, we aim to share uh, insights into diverse classes, forecasting knowledge, again exchange amongst our investor community. So my name is Devanshu Benlish, and I am the Vice President for Altport Experts India. With me, I have a speaker, Mr. Sanjay Chawla from Renaissance. Sanjay Chawla ji is head of research and co-founder from Renaissance. Let me take a moment and introduce Mr. Sanjay Chawla ji. Sanjay ji has 20 years of experience in institutional equities and equity strategies. He has worked with firms like JP Morgan, JM Financial, Kotak, and MK Global. He finished his BTech in engineering from IIT Kanpur and then MBA from IIM Calcutta. As a head of research and co-fund manager at Renaissance, Sanjay ji leads and mentors the research team and is significantly involved in company research, stock selection, fund management, fund marketing, and writing the Renaissance monthly newsletter. So welcome Sanjay ji. Hope you are doing well.
Thank you. Yes, I hope everybody's doing fine.
Yeah. So, Sanjay ji, as you know, our format of the show, so our investor community would like to first see your strategy.
Yes.
What do you do and how do you do? And from there we can start their Q&A.
Sure. Certainly, Devanshu, thanks for the kind introduction. Let me also share my screen. So I'm going to be talking about our fund, our strategy, our investment philosophy first. Then spend some time on the market outlook, how we are looking at it at the current juncture. And third, of course, as you mentioned, that some views and thoughts on the impact of these GST changes and the reforms which have happened, which were announced 2 days ago. So let me start sharing the screen first. My screen is visible. So we are a more than 7-year-old firm now. And by the way, I'm not a co-founder at Renaissance. I'm a fund manager. I mean, I was a co-fund manager when I joined, but now I'm a fund manager over here, and also the head of research, as Devanshu, introduced me as. So, very quickly, India's story still remains very strong, powerful, one of its kind. Like China was also one of its kind story. India is also, one of its kind. There's no comparison with any country or scale. China has grown in its own way, in its own fashion. We are a democracy, and we are growing. We are finding our own way, but we are growing. We are the largest, fastest growing large economy, and I think if you see the pace at which we have grown, we added $4.3 trillion of GDP in 65 years, from 60 to 25. For the next 4.4 trillion, 4 trillion plus, we expecting to add in the next 7-8 years. Okay, and what does it need? It needs simply 6.5% GDP growth, 3 to 4% inflation, and we just have to grow at 10% in terms of nominal GDP without letting the rupee depreciate too much. And in dollar terms, we will be at 8 to 9 trillion, before 2034. So it's not something, this chart shows that we have to change our growth trajectory. That is not the case at all. We have grown at these rates, in fact, slightly higher also over the last 5, 10, 15 years. We just have to maintain this growth rate. That's it. And I would say at the current juncture, from a macro point of view, our state of the economy point of view, we are in a very good shape. If you look at what happened in FY14, like 13, 14, so this is data at a 5-year interval, fiscal 14, fiscal 20, fiscal 25. See how the way in which inflation has come under control, from high single digit, we are actually turning double digit food inflation. And that's why the rupee depreciation was very rapid in the early part of last decade. Now we are at 4.5% inflation. In fact, as we speak, we are at a multi-year low inflation, below around 2%. And this GST cut will actually bring down the inflation further. That's even better. So that's a great point. Current account deficit, we are broadly neutral, -1%, we can handle it. Fiscal deficit, again, 4.8% was last year. This year we'll do 4.4% of GDP. We are on track. Government has given a path to fiscal consolidation. We are on track. 10-year bond yields, interest rates, basically, which is setting the cost of capital in India, that has come down. We are now 6.5% or so. Real GDP growth rate, as I was indicating, that maintaining 6.5% is not getting to a different orbit. It's just maintaining the current momentum, and I think we are well equipped to do that. Forex reserves very comfortable. We need that support because we import a lot of oil through dollars. Rupee, yes, it continues to depreciate. It doesn't always have to do with our inflation, our growth rate, but sometimes it has to do with the growth profile, of other economies, especially US. It also has to do with, risk off factors. Sometimes when the money moves to the US, that also determines dollar rupee. Nifty 50, we have almost 3 times now in the last 5 years. So this is why I think we're on a very solid macro ground. As I said, 6 to 7% GDP growth, real GDP growth is not new to us. We have done it. Fiscal consolidation, I mentioned this is the path of the government. FY31 का government ने guidance दिया कि they will be at roughly 3.6%. So the path is the deficit will keep coming down, and this year we'll do 4.4%. And this GST cut, the kind of stops that the government has given, this will not change it dramatically. I'll come to it again when I discuss the GST impact. So interest rate cuts, this all adds up. Why is RBI able to cut rates? Because last year we had a soft year in terms of growth, right? So growth is important. So to drive growth, secondly, inflation is actually well under control. So it allows RBI to cut rates. Now, most people are thinking that abhi aur rate cut nahi hoga. 1% cut ho chuka hai, repo rate. We think that there is more room for rates to go down in the next 3 to 6 months as RBI revises its inflation trajectory, because they have not last time when they give the inflation forecast, they did not factor the GST cut. This time they will come back and revise the inflation forecast, and if it turns out to be lower, which it will, there is room to cut interest rates more. So we have that still buffer and sort of a monetary stimulus which still can be given. Not that we are struggling on growth. Last quarter GDP growth rate was 7.8%, 1Q. That's fantastic. This data needs to be updated a little bit. I'll come back to it, in terms of the stimulus, but just look at the items here. Don't look at the amounts, because amounts will change, over time. We have seen massive stimulus in terms of the income tax cut. Okay. And just to give a backdrop of this is why we are positive on the consumption story. We think, so we were away from consumption stocks for a long period of time, but now in 6 to 9 months, we've gotten back into it. And these are the reasons. And we see more and more reasons why we should be bullish on consumer story in India now from here onwards. Number one is the income tax cuts, 1 lakh crores of stimulus given to, tax savings given to people, up to 12 lakhs of taxable income. GST cut, it was expected. This slide is slightly old. Actually, GST cut has been announced, of course, and the total quantum is 1.8 lakh crores. 1.8 lakh crores is the stimulus given. RBI has cut the interest rate. This is 1.5 lakh crore is the savings on the EMI, that people will pay. Not all of that is reflected in the current EMI, but it gets factored over a period of time. Total stimulus, as you can see, 3.4 is the last number. You have to add 0.9 more. So roughly 4.3 lakh crores of stimulus has been announced. It's there. It's there in the pocket. It's there in the bag. Now, on top of that 4.3, what we are also expecting, and we have mentioned it to our investors in the past also, that this 8th pay commission has been announced. The total quantum by which the salaries of the government, employees, central government employees, can go up potentially is 1.8 lakh crores per year from next year onwards. if not calendar 26, certainly, from April onwards, which is fiscal 27. If you add 1.8 lakhs to it to 4.3, you have got a number of 5.1 lakh, 6.1 lakh crore. तो 6 लाख करोड़ का गवर्नमेंट ने मतलब स्टिमुलस मेजॉरिटी आ चुका है, थोड़ा और पाइपलाइन में है, इट विल कम. 6 lakh crore is a very large number. हमारा जो कंट्री का जीडीपी है, दैट्स 350. दिस ईयर वी विल बी 354 लाख करोड़, 354 ट्रिलियन. तो उसका परसेंटेज देखेंगे, सो दैट्स एक्चुअली 1.7 1.8% ऑफ जीडीपी which government is given as fiscal stimulus. If you look at it as a percentage of India's total consumption, जो consumption होता है इंडिया में, that will be roughly 3% plus. तो जितना consumer spending होता है इंडिया में, 3% of that is being given as stimulus. That's a pretty significant number. So that's why we are positive on the consumption. We have changed our portfolio stance. If you look at Indian private consumption, so if you look at the breakup of GDP, there's consumption, there is capex, there's government spending, and there is export minus import. Consumption is the biggest part. It is 55 to 60% of GDP. Now that growth has been sluggish post-COVID. There was one spike, if you see between December 21, December 22. So calendar 22 में spike हुआ था, जब unlock हुआ था and people were able to go out and about. तो वो खर्चा कर रहे थे. There was a pent up demand, चाहे वो travel की हो, चाहे discretionary हो, in leisure activity हो. So consumption picked up, but then it has been sluggish. And a part of the reason is inflation. The inflation went up. There was stress in the rural areas. We had this global uncertainty also in terms of the Russia-Ukraine started in 22. So there were many factors. I won't go into them. And because of which the consumption growth has been a bit sluggish. But now, if you see last few quarters, certainly for 4 or 6 quarters, we are in the revival mode. I would also say that bulk of that revival is coming from rural. Urban consumption still has been on the softer side. And I'm not talking about the urban consumption right at the top end, but more of a middle end, and lower end. Urban consumption has been slower. Now, all these factors, if you see, which I mentioned as part of the stimulus, these are all going to drive urban consumption also, in addition to rural consumption. So I've mentioned all these factors, and I think consumption, private consumption, say the household consumption, that should grow slightly ahead of GDP in the coming years. So GDP growth अगर 6.5% है real terms में, तो consumption growth should be slightly higher. This is slightly inverse of what happened after COVID. After COVID, consumption growth थोड़ा सा कम था GDP से, okay. But the capex growth, industrial capex growth was very strong. Make in India, government giving a lot of PLI schemes. But a lot of that cycle is played out. In fact, government's own infrastructure spending went up dramatically. It was increasing at 20-25% every year. So our country, central government, which was spending roughly 1.5% of GDP on infrastructure, on capex, this has gone up to 3.4%, and that's a sizable increase. Part of the reason also is that the private sector का capex उतना pick up नहीं कर रहा है. तो उसका जो effect होता है उसको offset करने के लिए government को करना पड़ा. But I would say that government का requirement भी है, need भी है. India needs lot more infrastructure, and government has stepped up to the plate and done what it could. So आज की डेट में capex जो government का है infrastructure वगैरह पे, defense and all, that is going to grow at in line with nominal GDP. 10% growth होगी. तो जो 25% में grow कर रहा था वो 10% पे करेगा. So there is no pullback, but growth rate will be moderate. The growth rate will be in line or slightly lower than GDP. So and that's why we have changed our stance. Post COVID, we were more into some of the industrial stocks. We have moved out, and we are now into more higher weightage of the consumer stock, consumer discretionary kind of stocks. So let's talk about the latest bit here. Trump tariff, negative news, bad news for us. But in terms of the impact, you can see, our exposure is only 2% of GDP. China, Japan, Korea, Vietnam, they all have much higher exposure. तो हमारा impact बहुत कम होगा, but होगा, because 50% is a very high rate. You cannot pass it on to American buyers. 25% होता तो pass on थोड़ा pass on कर लेते, थोड़ा absorb कर लेते. अब 50% में तो you have to pass bulk of that. So it will impact the demand and our competitiveness versus other exporters to the US. तो उससे फर्क पड़ेगा export growth पे. But I would say that government is in a mission mode. They are trying to seek other export markets, trying to develop industries also. They're working with the industry. So thoda bahut impact offset hoga. I would say that if this in the worst case this continues, we will take it on our chin and we will continue. Thoda bahut absorb karenge, short term mein hit aayega. But then I would say that this GST cut has come at the right time. Just when we were thinking कि economy में थोड़ा सा फिर से एक headwind आ रही है in the form of this American tariffs, तो government का GST कट आ गया. Not that कि government ने अभी GST कट के बारे में सोचा, ये 2 साल से चल रहा था. It's just that now they've reached a conclusion that they need to give further consumption boost. And 2 साल के discussion के बाद GST Council has decided कि we need to reduce the overall rates. So the timing is very sweet. It is matching with the headwind that we were facing on account of US tariffs. So this is so India is now on par with Brazil, similar to China in terms of the tariffs. But our competition, Indonesia, Vietnam, Mexico, से है, तो वहाँ पे their rates are much lower. So we are at a disadvantage, and that's sort of the headwind which has happened. These are the sectors on the Trump tariff side which are exposed. People are generally aware of that. Gems, jewelry, textile, marine products. Pharma and generics, I would say, is still not really fully under these Trump tariffs. Engineering goods, yes. Some of these auto ancillaries which export to the US. Companies like Bharat Forge and all, tire companies, Balkrishna and all, they have exposure to the US, so they have challenges. Pharma generic, still there is no tariff imposed on them. But I don't think that even if tariff is imposed, it will be very high because Americans depend on our generic pharma. Now, despite all these, you can see how many shocks or tremors or mini shocks the economy or Indian market has been subjected to. I'm not even talking going to Russia, Ukraine in 2022. And of course, COVID is a once in a lifetime kind of event, so I'm not going to count that. But see what has happened in the last few months. April में Trump tariff आया, market 5% गिरा, but then recovered very quickly as Trump pulled back. China ने currency को devalue किया. That's our major competitor in the export market. Market was down only 2%. Indo-Pak war 2%. Of course, I would say that अगर ये war continue होता तो there could have been a bit more damage. Not a lot, not a whole lot, but some more damage. But yeah, so it stopped, and by that time market was down only 2%. Israel, Iran भी चल रहा था some for few days. Market has been broadly resilient. Question now is that Trump tariff 2 का जो negative impact हो रहा था, I would say कि उसको GST कितना offset करता है. My sense is that GST will, at a macro level मैं बोल रहा हूँ. देखिए, जो sectors हैं, employees हैं, jobs हैं, वो तो affect होंगे. उसको GST से नहीं बचाया जा सकता. उसके लिए you will have to find more markets to export to, newer markets. But at an aggregate level, हमारी economy के लिए, overall, this is a neutral event. This is not a negative event because GST will completely offset or comfortably offset the impact of Trump tariffs. एक और चीज मार्केट में जो हुई है बहुत सालों से कि मार्केट, मैंने तो आपको रिसेंट डेटा दिया कि मार्केट्स आर वेरी रेजिलिएंट, बट लुक एट दिस डेटा फॉर द लास्ट 13-14 years. 14 साल का डेटा है ये, कैलेंडर ईयर वाइज. We have had only 2 drawdowns for the year. December 11 में 25% मार्केट गिरा था. We had this policy paralysis, high inflation, and rupee depreciation and all that. उसके बाद मार्केट सिर्फ एक बार नेगेटिव रिटर्न दिया है, 4% ओनली December 15 में. So नेगेटिव रिएक्शंस मार्केट के, जो नेगेटिव जो ड्रॉडाउन है फॉर द ईयर, नेगेटिव रिटर्न्स, this has gone down substantially. In fact, December 15 के बाद से एक भी साल नहीं है जहाँ पे निफ्टी ने नेगेटिव रिटर्न दिया. Yes, there have been some poor years. December 16 3%, 3% के हमारे 3-4% वाले 3 साल है, बट नेगेटिव नहीं है. This means that the market has become less volatile. This reduces the risk profile of the market. What does it mean? हमने इसको किस सेंस में देखा है? एक तो रिटर्न आप देख रहे हैं कि नेगेटिव नहीं हुए हैं. दूसरा, एफआई आउटफ्लोज बहुत जोर से भी होते हैं तो मार्केट नहीं गिरता है. Part of the reason why market has become more resilient is also because domestic mutual fund inflows have been very sustainable and robust, and we are at an all-time high in terms of monthly SIP flows to the equity funds, mutual funds. 26-27 crore पहुंच गए, and that number continues to go. That's a very sustainable amount of money coming into the market every year. Okay, and this will bring its own equity supply also. We will see in terms of IPOs and offer for sale and QIPs and all. Nifty has compounded, I would say, quite handsomely over the last 5, 10, 15. जो भी आप पीरियड ले लीजिए, डबल डिजिट रिटर्न दिया है. And that is very similar to Nifty 50 का जो EPS है. So basically जो profit growth आता है उतना ultimately रिटर्न आ जाता है. That's the bottom line I want to say. Now कुछ पीरियड में क्या होता है कि Nifty performance can be better than profit growth. 10 ईयर का परफॉर्मेंस देखेंगे तो प्रॉफिट ग्रोथ है 10%, बट निफ्टी 50 ने 11% रिटर्न दिया. तो कुछ पीरियड ऐसे होते हैं. ऑफ कोर्स शॉर्ट टर्म में तो 3 साल का व्यू देखेंगे तो बहुत डिफरेंस हो सकता है प्रॉफिट ग्रोथ और निफ्टी के रिटर्न ग्रोथ में. तो हमको वही साइकिल आइडेंटिफाई करनी होती है. दैट्स द काइंड ऑफ साइक्लिकलिटी वी वांट टू बेनिफिट फ्रॉम एंड जनरेट अल्फा. बट ऑन अ लॉन्ग टर्म बेसिस द रिटर्न्स आर क्वाइट अट्रैक्टिव बिकॉज आज की डेट में देखें तो इन्फ्लेशन भी कम हो गया है. तो अगर इन्फ्लेशन कम है, इंटरेस्ट रेट कम है, तो अब जो पहले जैसे रिटर्न एक्सपेक्टेशन होते थे कि 12% रिटर्न मिनिमम आना चाहिए, I don't think that's valid anymore because if your interest rates are low, inflation is low, even and you look at your FD returns, right? They're also falling. FD rates will keep coming down as the interest rate reductions percolate through the banking system. तो अगर आप FD अगर 5-6% ही मिलेगा तो 10-11% भी equity return is quite reasonable because your purchasing power is still increasing and because you're beating the inflation handsomely. So the point here is that I would say that at the current juncture जो हमारी आउटलुक है, मार्केट का वैल्यूएशन चीप नहीं है. निफ्टी 50 देखें तो आज की डेट में वो 20 टाइम्स 1 ईयर फॉरवर्ड है. अगले 12 साल में जो प्रॉफिट आने वाला है निफ्टी 50 कंपनीज का, उस प्रॉफिट का 20 टाइम्स है. तो चीप नहीं है मार्केट. इट इज इन लाइन विद लास्ट 10 ईयर एवरेज. बट अगर लास्ट 20 साल का एवरेज देखें तो मार्केट 17-18 का एवरेज होता था. तो 20 साल का एवरेज देखें तो उससे मार्केट थोड़ा महंगा है. 10 साल का देखें तो इन लाइन है. 20 times is not cheap. That's the bottom line. Therefore, यहाँ से जो ब्रॉडली जो रिटर्न्स आएंगे मार्केट के, वो प्रॉफिट से ही आएंगे. आपका पी री रेटिंग जो होती है, जो एक्स्ट्रा आपको रिटर्न देती है, उससे मुश्किल लग रहा है. मतलब मैं ये नहीं बोल रहा हूँ कि इम्पॉसिबल है. मार्केट आज 20 है तो 22-23 जा सकता है, क्यों नहीं जा सकता है. बट यू नीड सेंटिमेंट टू बी इन फेवर. यू नीड जो जियोपॉलिटिकल अनसर्टेनिटी है, दैट हैज टू गो डाउन. Right? We need to have a more peaceful geopolitics, not just globally, but also in our neighborhood. तो फिर मार्केट एंड ऑफ कोर्स वी नीड प्रॉफिट ग्रोथ. अब लास्ट ईयर का निफ्टी का प्रॉफिट ग्रोथ देखेंगे तो 4-5% था. 4-5% प्रॉफिट ग्रोथ है तो उससे आपका रिटर्न नहीं आएगा. फिर आपका मार्केट 20 टाइम पे है तो दैट इज नॉट जस्टिफाइबल. मार्केट 20 टाइम पे इसलिए है क्योंकि जो एक्सपेक्टेड प्रॉफिट ग्रोथ है दैट इज इन डबल डिजिट. तो एक तो profit growth has to turn around, and I think it is happening. We are very comfortable, we are very confident that profit growth is picking up. तो P rating हो सकती है, but it is more a function of external environment, geopolitics and neighborhood politics. Achieving some level of stability. और हमने देखा सितंबर 24 में जो मार्केट पीक हुआ था, तो वहां पे मार्केट का P 23 गुना था, 23 टाइम्स था. तो क्लियरली 23 पे सस्टेनेबल नहीं था, इसलिए मार्केट नीचे आ गया. एंड ऑफ कोर्स देयर वर अदर फैक्टर्स आल्सो, बट 20 से 23 जा सकता है, इम्पॉसिबल नहीं है. तो अगर गया भी तो आपको यू गेट दैट एक्स्ट्रा रिटर्न. प्रॉफिट ग्रोथ अगर 10% है और आपका मार्केट 2 साल में मान लीजिए 20 से 23 चला जाता है, तो 15% आ गया 2 साल में वहां से, तो 7.5% एक साल का रिटर्न और एक्स्ट्रा आ जाएगा. तो मार्केट अगर 10-12% प्रॉफिट ग्रोथ दे रहा है तो आपका 20% दे सकता है अगर 2 साल में मार्केट का पी 20 से 23 चला जाता है. तो So all that is possible, but in our base case, we are not factoring that. we are going with the assumption कि भाई market यहाँ से 10-12% निफ्टी का रिटर्न आएगा large cap, and our target from an alpha generation point of view to generate 5% alpha on every year on top of that on a 3 to 5 year basis, because our investment horizon tends to be slightly longer. एक और इम्पोर्टेंट फैक्टर है कि इंडिया का जो वेट है MSCI इंडेक्स में बढ़ गया है, so and that is very good because that is also supportive of the foreign flows, particularly जो passive ETF के flows होते हैं. आज की साइकिल में मैं देख रहा हूँ कि FII के इनफ्लोज कंटिन्यूसली नहीं आ रहे हैं, मोस्टली नेगेटिव ही आते हैं. नाउ जो FII का जो पैसा आ रहा है, इनफ्लोज आ रहा है, वो मोस्टली प्राइमरी में जा रहा है, न्यू इक्विटी इश्यूज में जा रहा है. सेकेंडरी मार्केट में FII का सेलिंग चल रहा है, एंड आई थिंक सो क्लियरली रीजन जो मैंने 2 रीजन है. एक तो है कि बाकी जो इमर्जिंग मार्केट्स हैं वो बहुत सालों से सोए हुए थे, दे हैव वोकन अप, दे आर आउट परफॉर्मिंग. इनफैक्ट इमर्जिंग मार्केट्स is also outperforming US markets, even though US market S&P is at an all-time high. So एक तो emerging market का परफॉर्मेंस अच्छा चल रहा है because they were at a very cheap valuation, तो वहां पे पैसा जा रहा है. दूसरा हमारे मार्केट का, जैसे मैंने बोला कि मार्केट का मल्टीपल सस्ता नहीं है. लास्ट ईयर 23 PE पे पीक हुआ था, आज भी 20 है. आज थोड़ा कंफर्टेबल है, बट स्टिल एज आई सेड 20 भी सस्ता नहीं बोलेंगे. तो FII के पॉइंट ऑफ व्यू से दे हैव गॉट चीपर ऑप्शन आउटसाइड इंडिया, तो फिर वहां पे पैसा जा रहा है. सो बट इवेंचुअली एक बैलेंस आ जाएगा जहां पे फिर से पैसा आना स्टार्ट होगा. बट आई वुड से दैट फॉर मार्केट टू गो अप वी डोंट नेसेसरली नीड दैट बिकॉज हमारा डोमेस्टिक इनफ्लोज इज सफिशिएंट as long as there is profit growth, and that is important. I think the number one चीज जो आज हम देख रहे हैं कि we want the profit growth to go back into double digits, क्योंकि लास्ट ईयर निफ्टी 50 का प्रॉफिट ग्रोथ 4-5% था. FY26 का हमारा एक्सपेक्टेशन है कि profit growth would be around 9-10%, which is not great, but it is better than last year. So we are on an improving trajectory. See, market को वही चाहिए, improvement trajectory चाहिए. चलिए इस साल का 10% आ रहा है. What is the expectation for next fiscal year? 15% plus. So clearly market is anticipating कि ये growth rate और accelerate करेगा, and therefore 20 time PE is sustainable. तो this is broadly our thesis. अगर हमको 10-12% लार्ज कैप से आ रहा है तो हमारा लार्ज कैप का टारगेट रहेगा करीब. सो ये मार्केट का ब्रॉड हमारा समरी है कि इस साल वी विल बी क्लोज टू डबल डिजिट. FY26 जो मैंने बोला 9-10% रहेगा. लास्ट ईयर का ग्रोथ स्लो डाउन था, 5% ही ग्रोथ था निफ्टी 50 का. अर्निंग्स डाउनग्रेड साइकिल सीम्स टू बी लार्जली ओवर. जो हर क्वार्टर में वी वर सीइंग सम अर्निंग्स कट. लास्ट क्वार्टर जो 1Q के रिजल्ट्स आए थे, हमने देखा थोड़े से और कट हुए हैं, बट नॉट वेरी सब्सटेंशियल. बाय एंड लार्ज द आउटलुक इज क्वाइट रोबस्ट, एंड ये सब चीज काफी डायनामिक होती है. अभी लास्ट क्वार्टर के रिजल्ट में लोगों को पता नहीं था कि GST कट आने वाला है, तो ठीक है इस साल के आपने नंबर काट दिए थोड़े से प्रॉफिट का जो एक्सपेक्टेशन है, बट देन GST आएगा तो यू विल बी फोर्स टू इंक्रीज इट, इफ नॉट दिस ईयर सर्टेनली नेक्स्ट ईयर. तो जो मीडियम टू लॉन्ग टर्म आउटलुक लेके चलेंगे, दे शुड बी कंफर्टेबल होल्डिंग द स्टॉक एट 20 PE एट द मार्केट लेवल. जैसे मैंने बोला, वैल्यूएशंस आर इन लाइन विद द लॉन्ग टर्म एवरेज. डोमेस्टिक फ्लोज कंटिन्यूज टू रिमेन स्ट्रांग. FII के फ्लो थोड़ा मिक्स है, तो प्लस माइनस चल रहा है, बट प्लस इज मोस्टली हैपनिंग इन द प्राइमरी साइड जो नए इश्यूज आ रहे हैं, बिकॉज नए इश्यूज थोड़ा सस्ते पे आ रहे हैं. ओवरऑल इंडिया का स्टैंडिंग, जो मेरा पहले पॉइंट जो मैंने जैसे स्टार्ट किया था कि इंडिया इज द फास्टेस्ट, विल कंटिन्यू टू बी द फास्टेस्ट ग्रोइंग लार्ज इकोनॉमी, एंड विद इन इमर्जिंग मार्केट इट विल स्टैंड आउट in terms of the profit growth. In terms of stock return, 12% यहाँ से expected है, which is not bad. And when the cycle turns, emerging market में जहाँ पे अगर वो अगर top out, peak out हो जाएंगे, तो फिर पैसा यहीं पर आएगा, because there is no other major option available with the foreign investors. हमारे डेट में आज की डेट में ये पोर्टफोलियो है. This is our Indian XPM, ये हमारा flexi cap है. So you can see the top holdings, top sectors also. And so we are very positive on financial services. इसमें हमारे प्राइवेट बैंक्स हैं, NBFCs हैं, इंश्योरेंस है, वेल्थ मैनेजर्स एंड जो कैपिटल मार्केट रिलेटेड है, एसेट मैनेजमेंट कंपनीज. So it's a very large sector, and we have got significant exposure to that. And this sector has done well. In the last, जो मार्केट का डाउन हुआ था, या इस कैलेंडर ईयर भी देख लेंगे, So this sector has done well broadly. It was not doing well. It was not outperforming the market for 2-3 years. But luckily, you can say that last year we had started adding HDFC Bank. Tech Mahindra also, we made money on it. Reliance we added recently. Infosys also we made money. So last year IT was a standout sector. This year it's been struggling a bit, but I think that is temporary. Anyway, we don't have a very large exposure to IT. It's only these two stocks. So we are very selective. Because in our portfolio, जो हमारा approach है, we have typically 25 to 28 stocks. So we are focused investors. 25 से 28 स्टॉक होते हैं, and our quality filters are fairly high. So our total stock जो investable है, जहाँ पे हम invest कर सकते हैं, they are just around 200. मार्केट में भले 5000 स्टॉक लिस्टेड है, जब हम फिल्टर करके देखते हैं तो हमारे पास 200 सवा 200 स्टॉक ही आते हैं. उसमें से 25 से 28 स्टॉक का पोर्टफोलियो बनाते हैं, which I think 200 stock is a very good number. It's a very large basket to select from. So we don't feel any constraint. आज की डेट में देखेंगे तो इस पोर्टफोलियो का जो फ्लेक्सी कैप है, large cap exposure is 54%. Mid cap is 23%. तो करीब 75 to 80% is in large and mid cap. And small percentage 23% is in small caps. अभी आप सेक्टर देखेंगे तो I think it's not difficult to understand कि हमारे जो small caps वगैरह हैं वो generally pharma chemical से आ रहे हैं. Because we are very bullish. So मैंने फाइनेंस की बात की कि फाइनेंशियल में हमारा सबसे इम्पोर्टेंट चीज जो हम देख रहे हैं क्रेडिट ग्रोथ, बैंक लोन ग्रोथ, वो थोड़ा सा सॉफ्ट हो गया बिकॉज आरबीआई ने काफी टाइट किया था अनसिक्योर्ड लोन. माइक्रो फाइनेंस में स्ट्रेस भी आई है, बट वो आरबीआई ने लूज करना शुरू कर दिया है और माइक्रो फाइनेंस का जो स्ट्रेस है दैट इज ऑल्सो पीक हो चुका है. सो आई थिंक द सेक्टर विल डू वेल. वी जस्ट नीड द लोन ग्रोथ टू पिक अप, क्योंकि अभी 9-10% हो गई है. And 19% is not a great growth. We need double-digit loan growth. So I think we will get there. It's a matter of time. But it's not just the private banks. हमारे पास जैसे मैंने बोला कुछ NBFCs भी हैं, capital market के भी हैं, insurance stocks भी हैं. Pharma chemical जब मैंने mention किया, we are very positive on the CDMO story, and most of the stocks are there in the mid cap or small cap side. तो हमारा mid cap small cap exposure काफी pharma से आता है. कंज्यूमर डिस्क्रिशनरी जो मैंने बोला ये हमारा 11% है आज की डेट में, बट दिस वाज लो सिंगल डिजिट. इट वाज एक्चुअली नॉन एग्जिस्टेंट आज से 1.5 साल पहले. तो वी वर नॉट बुलिश ऑन कंजम्पशन एंड वी वर प्लेइंग द कैपेक्स साइकिल, इंडस्ट्रियल साइकिल, एंड दैट डिड वेरी वेल फॉर अस. आप अगर परफॉर्मेंस देखेंगे, मैं जब जाऊंगा यू विल सी कि जो आउट परफॉर्मेंस है, बिकॉज वी वर एक्सपोज्ड टू द राइट स्टॉक्स, राइट सेक्टर्स आफ्टर कोविड, एंड दैट डिड वेरी वेल फॉर अस. वो हमने पोजीशनिंग थोड़ी चेंज की है, कंज्यूमर पे अभी ज्यादा आ गए थोड़ा सा. And again, we are seeing that the consumer story is playing out very well. There's so many good things which have happened this year on the consumption side, which I've already covered. Information technology, IT services, मैंने बताया, we are very positive on these two stocks. And I think the US में recovery is just a matter of time. Internet stocks also we have, because last का देखेंगे 12 से 15 महीने, the growth rate has come down, not just of the economy, but also companies का profit growth, right? Nifty 50 का मैंने बताया. तो आज के टाइम में जब ग्रोथ थोड़ा सॉफ्ट होता है, तो इट मेक सेंस टू गेट एक्सपोजर टू हाई ग्रोथ स्टोरीज. एंड आई थिंक जो इंटरनेट वाली स्टोरी है, इनका ग्रोथ रेट इज नॉट लिंक टू जीडीपी ग्रोथ और बाकी कंपनी का ग्रोथ, बिकॉज स्विगी या जोमेटो टाइप के कंपनीज हैं, या पीवी फिनटेक बोलेंगे, जो भी न्यू एज कंपनीज हैं, दे आर टेकिंग मार्केट शेयर अवे फ्रॉम existing guys, right? Or they're creating a completely new market, but demand is there, so they can grow much faster. Quick commerce है या food delivery है, they can grow much faster, irrespective of what is the growth rate of the economy. Okay, so these are sectors where we've got high exposure. If you look at the portfolio ka growth rate, sorry, हमारे portfolio का profit growth ये है this year 11%, which is slightly better than Nifty 50 जो मैंने आपको बताया 9 to 10% हम expect कर रहे हैं. FY 27 में 18% growth. So portfolio growth is also accelerating, just like Nifty 50 growth. But in FY 27, our portfolio growth is higher than what people are expecting from Nifty 50. So it is a faster growing portfolio and available at a cheaper multiple. In the sense, sorry. Yeah. So the PE ratio कम है, 17.3 है, जबकि Nifty 50 का PE ratio देखेंगे तो 18.5-19 है. तो I think our very likely to generate alpha because the growth rate is higher and the P multiple is lower. So we are well positioned to benefit from not just from high profit growth, but also from P multiple going up. So that is what up and down capture. So we also monitor कि हमारे पोर्टफोलियो का जो लास्ट 3 साल का देखेंगे अल्फा जनरेशन कहाँ से आया है. तो मार्केट जब ऊपर जा रहा था तब आया है 16% अल्फा. अब का मतलब है कि मतलब when the market is going up, our portfolio on an average is going up by 16% more. So and also on the downside, when the market is going down, we are generating 17% alpha. So we are falling less than the market whenever the market is going down on an average. This data is based on our last 3-year performance. Finally, this is so I talked about risk. I talked about the portfolio attributes. These are the return profiles. We are medium to long-term investors. As I said, we buy 25 to 28 stocks, and when we add a stock, we are buying with a minimum 3-year time horizon. We are not buying for 6 months or 1 year. It can always happen that the stock doubles in 1 year, and then the upside is much less. We are happy to sell it, but when we buy a stock, we are very clear that we are buying with a minimum 3-year horizon, and therefore we also communicate this to investors that they should look at a portfolio performance and returns on a slightly medium to longer term basis. If you see 3-year, 5-year, there's a very handsome, significant alpha which has got generated. By the way, हमारा जो portfolio है Nifty India Next, this is a flexi cap, and our benchmark is actually Nifty 200. Nifty 50 का मैंने data बता रहा था, but हमारा जो actual benchmark here है Nifty 200 है. We've given data for both the indices, but compared to Nifty 200, because the portfolio जैसे मैंने बताया कि it is largely mostly large and mid cap. So we think Nifty 200 is the right benchmark. 3-year alpha about 8% every year. 5-year alpha is roughly 17% every year compared to the Nifty 200. Just one more point I want to cover with respect to our portfolio profile. So this is the ये जो chart है, this is telling us what is the alpha generated for the clients who have been with us for 3 years minimum. 3 साल जो हमारे साथ रहे हैं उनका हमने कितना अल्फा जनरेट किया है. जैसे अप्रैल 23 की बात करें, अप्रैल 23 में the alpha generation जो green column है, that is 20%. This is for the clients who joined us in April 20 or before. Minimum 3 साल हमारे साथ थे वो client. उनका हमने देखा अल्फा in April 23, that's a 20% annual alpha we generated. So overall हमने इसको टाइम सीरीज देखेंगे तो जुलाई 25 तक आ जाएंगे. तो आप देखेंगे कि जो अल्फा जनरेशन है for clients who have been with us for 3 years minimum is between roughly 8 to 26%. That's the alpha generation. So जो 3 साल हमारे साथ रहा है, they all those clients have sort of got this alpha in this range, 8% से 26% की range में, depending on the client. But more importantly, I also want to talk about beta, which is a risk profile of the portfolio. Our portfolio beta throughout this जो हमने ये जो data analysis किया है 2.5 साल का हमने देखा है, throughout this period the beta has been in a very narrow, very tight corridor, 0.99 to 1.07. So, and this is very similar to the market index risk, जो benchmark है. So what we are trying to say is that कि जो हमारा risk profile है portfolio का, that is actually similar to the market, similar to the index, and yet we are generating alpha compared to the index. This portfolio has delivered alpha, so we have not taken any extraordinary risk, and that's actually our investment philosophy and style, that we are moderate risk investors. We are not very high risk investors because we think that high risk doesn't always equal to high reward. So we are moderate risk investors, and then by taking that moderate amount of risk, we want to generate alpha in terms of our approach. So in fact, जो 3 साल का मैंने 2.5 साल का डेटा दिया है, in fact most of the time the beta has been very close to 1. वो शुरू में थोड़ा 1.1 के आसपास था, but now it is very close to 1. So last 2 years, so this is exactly reflects our style and approach. Take moderate risk and try to generate alpha. We don't try to generate alpha by taking too much risk or by taking too less risk also. So we are not we are not very conservative investors, but we are moderate risk investors. This is how we have made portfolio adjustments, and a lot of that I explained to you during our conversation. What are the factors? How we played last 3-4 years, how we are looking at the next 3-4 years, what kind of. So this all is captured in this portfolio changes. You can see the banking exposure, BFSI, financial exposure has gone up. IT has remained the same. Pharma chemical, we've been bullish on CDMO story, and we continue to be bullish. Industrials, which is what I was pointing out, that exposure has gone down because we believe that the days of very high capex growth or government infrastructure growth are there. Those days are over. Abhi government 20-25% साल में खर्चा नहीं कर सका in terms of the growth rate. And a lot of the work is already done in terms of roads, highways, railways also. जो नए एरिया है वो थोड़ा डिफेंस के हैं. रेलवे चलता रहेगा because railway we have a long way to go in terms of the city and metros and all, and modernization and all that on the freight side also. So, but by and large, industrial exposure we have brought it down because we feel that now we are ready for a consumption cycle. So if you see consumer discretionary, this portfolio exposure has gone up in the last 8 to 10 months. So I will stop here. I think I've taken most of the time already, but I'm happy to take any questions. Devanshu.
So my investor community is asking, how do you see markets going forward after the GST reforms?
Yeah. So let me cover that. I think, look, see the market reaction to GST cuts and the reforms. It has been, good in certain pockets only. This is natural, but by and large, the market is not jumping up on the basis of that. I would say that the part of the reason is that because of the global uncertainty that we are dealing with a 50% tariff to our exports to the US, and people want to see what is the impact of that as well. Okay. That is one. Secondly, as I said, most important thing that we are monitoring right now, markets are not cheap. So the only way you can get good returns is through profit growth. So profit growth recovery market still is waiting for a double-digit growth. See, 20 time का PE है, double-digit growth जब तक नहीं आएगी तब तक वो confidence नहीं आता. Otherwise, the PE is too high. Market is expensive. Currently, as I said, we are coming out of a soft growth phase of the economy. We are picking up. जैसे मैंने बोला कि fourth quarter का देखेंगे अगर Nifty 50 का profit growth 2-3% था YOY. 1Q का देखेंगे तो it is now more than 5%, 5-6%. 5-6% is still single digit, but it is improvement. So trajectory wise, direction wise, we are going on the right track, but we are still not at double digit. My sense is that you will actually see a much, but having said that, GST at least has put a floor to the market, some sort of a floor to the market. So जो downside जो लोग सोच रहे थे कि US tariff के बाद हो सकती है, वो अब नहीं होगी, because GST is putting a floor to the market. So यहाँ से one should not expect any major correction. 4-5% market can always go down, but that will be buying opportunity. So by and large, we think that market will now start performing from here. The key data point to watch it कि Nifty 50 का profit growth double digit का hit होने वाला है. Whether it happens in second quarter looks difficult, but definitely festive quarter, third quarter, it's quite possible. And second quarter, why I say this also is because वो GST के चक्कर में थोड़ा सा sales थोड़ा सा slow down हो गया था कुछ दिनों के लिए, right? So that also impacts the second quarter. But I would say that we just have to see the direction. अगर last quarter में 1Q में 5-6% growth आया है निफ्टी का, अगर वो इस quarter में 7-8% होता है, 8-9% होता है, we are on the right track. Market will start performing. So I think we are coming to the end of the consolidation phase of the market, is how I would put it. What can really take the market up in a big way? Number one, the US has to, this taco has to play out. Trump has to chicken out, or there has to be some sort of a trade deal with the US. Some peaceful deal has to be there. That is the number one factor. And number two, we have to have that clear double-digit growth trajectory. And GST cut should lead to a consumer spending, which surprises positively on the profit side. the volume growth. तो ये दो चीजें हो जाएंगी तो market can actually start breaking out from the range.
So thank you, Sanjay ji, for giving your insights about your fund and your strategies and about the market. Thanks everyone for joining this call from your busy schedule. See you again. So you can, if you have any questions, you can reach us at www.aifpml.com, or you can contact or you can email us at devanshu@aifpml.com. Thank you. Have a lovely day.
Thank you, Devanshu. Have a good day, friends.